Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. Today I'm going to bring a new book review to you of Goosebumps Horror of the Witch House. And this is written by Denton J. Tipton and Matthew Doe Smith. The art's done by Chris Finoglio, which I think has been involved at least in one of these books so far. Of course, this is put out by IDW Publishing, or IDW Comics, if you want to call them that. I have to admit, in some ways, I'm thankful for what they did with this book, but at the same time, it's not a great book. It's not really even a good book, per se. Maybe really young readers would like this. You know, I've read the first two books that IDW put out. The first two collection trades, whatever you want to call it. The first one is Monsters at Midnight. The second one is Download and Die. Immediately, both of those pissed me off because they had political SJW nonsense in them. And I will tell you up front, this one does not. And I think it's one good step in the right direction, but not enough to be a good book, you know? The premise is okay. I actually kind of liked it. I thought it was okay. The problem is that these story arcs are only 3 issues long. And a lot of the time it's wasted, like entire pages are filled up with just one image, right? Or maybe a few panels on one entire page. You know, that's a lot of wasted space, honestly. For comic book people like myself, I mean, I think all of us have a little bit of an issue when it's not utilized the most, I guess when it's not executed the best possible way that it could have been. But this particular book, again, I'm thankful there's no politics in it, because I expected that with IDW and with the last 2 books. I figured there'd be some kind of nonsense political thing or some gay character or something just thrown in just to say that they have character, but they're really just gay because, you know, we all know that's all the gay people have going for them is that they're just gay. That's it. It's a joke. Chill. I was thankful that this book wasn't like the other 2. It is a step in the right direction, for the most part. The problem is that it's still too modern. And I think the more I talk about my review and talk about the plot itself, I think I'll get a little bit more into that, just so you guys kind of know where I'm coming from when I say it's too modern. I think most people who are Goosebumps fans like myself that happen to be 20 and 30-somethings, you probably know what I'm talking about already with technology and whatnot. But to start off slow into this review, let's start with the plot itself, the premise itself. I thought it sounded like a cool idea. We haven't really done a whole lot of witch-type stuff in Goosebumps with R.L. Stine. And he has no ties to books like this and IDW Comics and all that. So, with this story, basically it opens up with a new, like kind of an old rundown house. There's a lady who happens to be going through a tour to try to end up buying this. She turns out to be a witch. And immediately I have an issue with this because we find out that her spell book is her tablet. Yes, her iPad has a spell book in it. That's what it's come to. That's the level of creativity that comics have hit, and that novel writing and book writing and all of those things have hit at this point. And this isn't a diss on the 2 writers, not as much as I want it to be. I don't think that a lot of people who write outside Goosebumps material, like fan fiction and stuff, I notice this more and more. Most people cannot capture the feel of Goosebumps, whether it be the books, the original books, the newer books, any of them. They all feel the same in my opinion, for the most part. Some of them I still suspect are ghost-written. They don't feel entirely like the old classic series, or R.L. Stine's writing style for that matter. But even the TV show was able to capture the feeling of Goosebumps, and even in some instances, I would say, kind of created the feeling of Goosebumps for us people that grew up watching this show and loved it so much and grew up reading the books and whatnot. This show may have even kind of created that whole atmosphere that we all feel when we think about that Goosebumps fondness that we have from our kid age and our childhood and stuff. But it felt similar enough to the books that they felt like they were Goosebumps. These comics don't feel like that. That's one of my biggest issues with all of the IDW stuff, politics or not. They all don't feel like Goosebumps. And a lot of it has to do with all the technology stuff. I mean, the second book in the series is called Download and Die. It's totally focused on the idea of technology. It was an okay premise. I think the second book, if I had to say a plot, was the best of all 3 of these books so far. I would say Download and Die is the best plot-wise. This one following that, and then the first Monsters at Midnight somewhere behind that, very, 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 very far away. But the story here feels lacking. It's really not all that great. It's really not even that fun, for that matter. At least Download and Die had that with the cell phone that was found, and, you know, it could do all this wacky stuff and mess with reality when you use different filters on the camera and stuff. I mean, it was kind of a fun concept that could have been a really cool Goosebumps book just by itself. But the way it was executed, the way the characters are written, do not have the dialogue that Goosebumps always had. A lot of comic book writers try to keep the same writing style, very witty, very over-the-top, kind of silly humor, instead of just having a one-liner for a joke, right? You have these really long, drawn-out things that are supposed to be so funny, that these long paragraphs, that if you were in any situation where you were chased, you would not be saying all of that. I don't really know what else I can try to say to explain my point better. I think a lot of you kind of get what I'm talking about. People who are comic book fans probably know what I'm talking about. Instead of just having somebody run away or having something to say, like I said, kind of like a one-liner type thing. For some reason, comic book creators don't do that anymore. They just don't. I think the master writer of that nowadays is Jonathan Mayberry, whether it be with his novels or the comics he works on every once in a while. Love Mayberry's one-liners. I think he always sets up a joke really well. Most comic book creators and writers and everything cannot do that well, in my opinion. I would love to get my hands on being a writer for IDW Comics, at least for the Goosebumps series. I really think if you got a new artist who wasn't doing the silly, kiddish type art, which I want to show you an example of that, by the way. I haven't shown that in my previous 2 reviews. You need somebody who's not going to do some kind of childish artwork like this. No matter how much of a Goosebumps kiddie property this is, it should not be treated this way. The old TV show was not treated like this with kid gloves most of the time. Look at the Night of the Living Dummy 3 episodes. I mean, they were not treated with kid gloves. They were genuinely scary. They were things that frightened me to death. The Haunted Mask Part 1 and Part 2 episodes were genuinely scary. They had a little bit of a budget behind them. We need a better artist. We need that. At least if you were going to do the style of like the old like Strange Tales comics from Marvel's old days when they were Atlas comics. If you did some really cool tribute like that, and you did genuinely scary stories, with maybe a little bit of humor, but not a comedy, which is what comics typically are. Even when they're scary, they are comedies, almost always. They never just have humor, and that's one of my biggest complaints about comic books in general nowadays. Doesn't matter if it's DC, Marvel, or anybody else. It's like people don't know how to capture just humor, just a little humor, in a serious, frightening story. You know, it's like people don't know how to do that anymore. With novels, books, movies, anything like that. Everything has to be a comedy, like that's more entertaining, and it's not. Not everybody enjoys that. This book falls for that. It's very comedic, at least it's trying, you know. But anyway, the witch buys the house. She loves how creepy and rundown it is. There are 3 kids. There's a girl with red hair, wears glasses, kind of chubby. I would argue she's our main character. Her name is Rosie. There's another girl named Becca, who's kind of into sports, kind of tomboyish. And then you have another guy, I forgot what his name is, like Carlos or something. Carlos is just kind of a cool guy, kind of top-tier dude in the school. These 3 end up at one point hearing some noises coming from the Whaley house, which is the witch's house. And this house has been, like, completely abandoned for very, 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 very long amounts of time. Like, since the parents of these kids were, like, in middle school, right? So they've had these haunted ghost stories going down through the centuries, through, well, I guess not centuries, but you know what I mean. Through many, 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 many years, like 20 or so years, of people saying this house is haunted, that's why nobody wants to live there. And they even have, like, a big event the day of that this witch moves into this place. She doesn't tell them that she's a witch or anything. But at this event, they kind of reveal, like, yeah, you know, she just wants the house. Now, our 3 main characters, they happen to run into each other when in the middle of the night they start hearing this really loud, like, sawing noise and hammering noise from the Whaley house. They all get their flashlights out and stuff. They happen to be walking out in the different areas and stuff. They're not friends at this time. They kind of become friends and bond over this situation. They end up meeting out in the woods. When they hear all this racket, they end up deciding to walk together to the Whaley house, and they look in through a window and see that there's like tools and stuff floating around the inside of the house doing different things. You know, repairs on the house. So they know that this person, this woman, is some kind of witch or something. Like I said, she has the tablet with her spell book on it, which is just stupid. When she casts spells, she says abracadabra and then just names off whatever she wants to happen. I think it's kind of trying to be cute, but it's really not cute, you know? It's in some way it kind of works in an understandable way. In other ways it does not work, in my opinion. I have a feeling where we have two writers for a Goosebumps 3-issue story, that one came up with the concept and the other one came up with all the dialogue. That's what I feel, right? I don't see why it would take two people to write the story. I don't get it. I wish that I would have the opportunity to write for IDW Comics and do something better. Not that these guys did a bad job. Like I said, it wasn't really a good story, but it wasn't, at least it wasn't political, and it wasn't bad in that sense. You know, like the last two books relatively were. At least this one was different, you know, in a decent way for the most part. It's kind of a mess, though. Like I said, it's really not that engaging. Not really a whole lot happens in this book. I read this book, this 60-page book, in probably 20 minutes. That's how little dialogue is actually in the book. It just kind of flies by. That's fine with me as long as it's good. I don't really care how long the story is as long as it's a good book. This is not necessarily a good book. If you're a collector of Goosebumps, I think you should go ahead and get it. If you're an art fan, don't. If you're a comic fan, don't. If you're a Goosebumps fan, get it. I guess, if you want to. If you're collecting all of it, you know. This seems like at one point this will be a collectible, rare, hard-to-find book because these are not selling well. Any of the three haven't, from what I can tell. I love Goosebumps. This is not Goosebumps. It doesn't feel like it. You have to capture the tone and the feeling of Goosebumps to get people to catch on to this and want to read it. That's my biggest complaint I've had over and over again with these 3 trade paperbacks, or trades, they're all hardcover, whatever, of these collected issues. None of them, none of the ones that IDW have done, have felt like Goosebumps. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it's so hard for everybody to maintain this and do it well. You know, are these people just not fans of Goosebumps? What is it? That's what I feel more. I feel like no one is a fan of Goosebumps, actually. Maybe they're familiar with seeing it on TV or watching an episode here or there when they were a kid, but it doesn't feel like somebody sat down and researched how those books are written, how the show episodes are written that feel like the books. It's almost like they don't get it. Even with the Goosebumps movies. I love both of the movies for the most part. I like Haunted Halloween. I love the first one. Even those don't feel like Goosebumps. And I get what they did there. I understand they went for more of like a Jumanji feel in the first film. The second film they went for a small scale kind of Goosebumps feel, but not entirely. It just kind of proved my point. A lot of people don't know how to write Goosebumps the way R.L. Stine does. I don't want the future of Goosebumps looking like this. When R.L. Stine passes away one day, which he will, if I make it past that, I don't want to see Goosebumps become this. It deserves so much better. It's so great. It deserves so much better. I hope and pray that at some point in the future, that maybe I could take over comic book stuff for Goosebumps in the future and just do better. I don't know how good I could do. I've never tried, but I think I could do better. I think that easily anybody that's an actual fan, like Zach Baby TV, Goosebumps Aussie fan, or Bjorn, if you want to call him that, or 90s Portal, which is his newer channel, I think anybody actually familiar with Goosebumps could do a better job. That's how I feel about this. I would love to know what your thoughts are on Goosebumps Horrors of the Witch House. It wasn't a horrible book. It wasn't good. You know, it wasn't even an average book, in my opinion. Again, props that there was no politics to it. I'm very thankful for at least that being obliterated, at least in this book. Hopefully they'll keep taking the right turn. Get rid of the technology stuff. You don't need technology in Goosebumps. It doesn't really help. Even the newer books don't have as much talking about cell phones or computers or anything like that. It's better when it comes to the horror genre, even for kids stuff like this. It's better, in my opinion, to put the characters in a situation where you don't have to constantly break their cell phones or make them trip to break their laptops or anything like that. If they just don't have technology at the time that they're doing something, it makes it scarier, in my opinion. I think it very much accomplishes that. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this book? Put them down below, guys. I'd love to hear what you have to say about my review, about the book itself. What did you think about the previous 2 books, Monsters at Midnight and Download and Die? I'd love to hear those thoughts down below as well. I also did reviews on those as well on my channel. They're in my comics playlist, if you want to check that out. If I had to rate Horrors of the Witch House, excuse me, on a 5-star basis, I would probably give this maybe a 2 out of 5. It wasn't horrible, but it definitely wasn't that great. Or even that good, for that matter. And I don't mean that to be mean or sarcastic or anything like that. I really think Goosebumps, like I said, deserves better than what it's getting from IDW. Yeah, what are your thoughts, guys? Put them down below. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this book and review it and stuff. I went to Barnes & Noble this past Tuesday when it was supposedly released, and they didn't have anything. I called Wednesday, they didn't have anything. For some reason, Barnes & Noble sucks. They never have anything out, ever, that I need, especially with newer Goosebumps books, or any book that I'm looking for in general. If it's anybody who's not Stephen King or Stephanie Meyer or J.K. Rowling, they don't have it. Anyway, so I got it today in the mail. I finally read it, and here's my review. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for hearing my rambling about this book. And may the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.